Good morning. My name is Bruce Moore, Superintendent of Greenlawn Cemetery here in East Longmeadow, and I'm here with Dan Blaine from Storyton this morning, and we're here to give you a little genealogy about this particular brownstone gravestone here, and he'll be doing that, and then we're going to be cleaning this gravestone. You can see how over 100 plus years all the moss and lichen have grown on top. We are in Greenlawn Cemetery, which was established in 1828, and this is the older portion of the cemetery. Pleasant Street is on this side and Calendar Avenue on this side, and behind me is Brownstone Gardens, just to give you some bearings. I'm going to be soaking it with my tank sprayer while Dan gives you a little genealogy of the Midwood family. So I'm going to turn this over to Dan.
Good morning. My name is Dan Blaine, and James Midwood would be my great-great-great-grandfather. He was born in Runcorn, England in 1833, and Runcorn is about 15 miles upriver from Liverpool. And he was a stonemason by trade. His father and his grandfather were both stonemasons. And in about 1858, his son Charles was born, and Charles was also raised to be a stonemason. And in the late 1870s, they immigrated here to East Longmeadow to become part of the brownstone quarries that are all over this area. And so in 1881, they were here in the East Longmeadow area, and James was a stone cutter, as was his son. And that brownstone gravestone of James's, he actually hand-carved himself. And a little bit later, we'll go into detail as to how that was done. James lived until the year 1886, when he passed away and was buried here. And his family is still here local in the area, in Springfield and West Springfield.
If you notice, this stone is covered with moss and lichen from 100 plus years of just sitting out in the open. And when you clean a stone like this, there's certain things you definitely don't want to do. You don't want to use any bleach, and you don't want to use a wire brush. The stone is sedimentary sandstone, and the brush will scratch it. If you end up using the bleach on the stone, it will kill the mildew, but it ends up leaving a residue which is detrimental to the stone. So please do not use bleach or a wire brush. Use just a soft nylon brush and water. We've soaked the stone, so we're going to do the cleaning now and just show you how that goes. For time's sake, we've only washed the front and a little bit of the side, and we're going to just give it a little rinse right now. And you can see, should be able to see a good before and after. We have one more bucket. It still needs a little fine tuning, but you can see it's quite an improvement over what it was. Thanks, Dan. All right. If you notice on this stone, there's all this high relief carving of flowers. There's 20 of these all the way around the stone. And I think there's 6 sections to this particular tombstone, and they're all meticulously carved and set on top of each other. And I've brought some of the quarry tools from the time era. They were from another famous stone cutter, Jonas Robinson, from around 1870, and I'll just show you a little bit how he might have done this particular carving. But to excise all this stone away from these and leave the flowers is just remarkable, how the skill this gentleman had, and I'd be proud to have him for an ancestor. This is my favorite stone in the cemetery here. The cemetery was established in 1828, and I'm going to let Dan hold this microphone, and I'm going to grab a couple tools here. This would have been your basic mallet used to do the chiseling of the stone, you didn't want to use a metal mallet because it peens the top of the stone of the tools over. There's a sharp chisel here and a couple of flat ones I brought. But they had a multitude of tools they could use. And I'll just set these down here. Now, like this little pointed one, they would use that to go in here and just tap out all these little features on the stone. There's 20 of these, as I said. If you made one mistake, your whole stone is ruined. So you can imagine that there's a little sweat involved doing all this particular stonework. And if you see all the edges, they're crandled on the edges. They had different tools to do all the different relief carving on here. And it's just a real testimony to the skill of this gentleman. And all we knew was that there was a Mr. Midwood buried here. We didn't know anything about him, that he came from England. And so we're just pleased to be able to clean this particular stone up. Now, we've only done part of this stone. The rest needs to be done, and if there's any high school kids looking to do community service, there's plenty of these gravestones in here that need a cleaning, and other cemeteries in town. There are quite a few that have gone into neglect over the years, and we'd be pleased if you contact the Historical Commission in town, and we'll set you up doing some of your community service. It's just a matter of scrubbing and rinsing, and you can get a better appreciation of town history. And heading over here, we're standing in front of a Civil War veteran's tombstone we're going to be talking about. This particular cemetery, being so old, the people were just buried in wooden caskets, and as the caskets deteriorated over time, they collapsed on top, and there was quite a bit of sunken ground in here. Some of the old timers said it was like hills and valleys in here, and they've had to bring in a lot of fill over time. I think in the 1940s they started putting people more in the vaults that are commonplace today, and they're not buried as deep as they used to be. Here is a large brownstone monument for the Burt family. Edward Burt is buried here along with his parents. They lived on Maple Street in East Longmeadow. Their house is still there just after the main entrance to the high school. The high school was built on their land, which was predominantly an orchard. Burt Avenue in town is named for them. Edward Burt fought in the Civil War. He enlisted as a volunteer in Company D, 37th Regiment, Pittsfield, Mass. in 1862 at 22 years of age. He fought in many battles, including Gettysburg in 1863. His regiment camped in Chantilly, Virginia after the battle, and there he lost a silver ID badge. It was not a dog tag, but a privately purchased badge that 1 in 1,000 soldiers wore, so that if killed, they would not be buried in mass graves. In 1985, Greg Cummings of Fairfax, Virginia, found his badge with a metal detector under 8 inches of dirt in a field that was about to become a shopping mall. Through painstaking research, Greg traced him back to East Longmeadow, and in 1995 came here to see Burt's grave. In May 1864, Edward was shot in the leg during another battle. They tried amputating his leg, but he didn't survive the operation. On the bottom of the monument is an inscription: a dutiful son, a brave soldier. This cemetery and others are full of people with very interesting pasts, so please visit them and see where your research might lead. We washed the part where the inscription is. You'll see that it's pretty clean right in the middle, where the top to bottom there, so the rest of it needs cleaning, and it didn't take us long to scrub that little bit out, and it really makes the cemetery look a lot nicer. That pretty much concludes our tour of this cemetery, and we hope you had an enjoyable time. Thank you very much.